The GoPro Hero 12 has some features which make it the most cinematic GoPro that has ever been made, and I'm going to tell you all of those settings in this video. Plus I've also created a really handy PDF sheet with all of them on that you can download completely for free down below, and I'm going to show you how to make your footage really cinematic. But first, I've got to move to a different country. Now I'm in the Australian outback where I've been for the past 8 months, but it's time for me to move on. I've got a very long journey to get where I'm going. See if you can guess down in the comments where I'm heading, but I've torn down my old studio, my bags are packed, and it's time for me to hit the road. And for a bit of context, I left the UK 2 years ago with one backpack. And now look at me. This is going to be a bit of a mission. Any final guesses on where I am by looking at the scenery around me? Well, I'm actually in Bali, which is the land of the gods, and I'm next to a little side road, so you might hear a couple of bikes going past. But let's get into the best cinematic settings to use on the GoPro Hero 12. The first thing that you actually need to do is you need to change these settings here. To find them, you just swipe down on the screen, then swipe across to the right, and then select Preferences. You then go into Video and change the bitrate to high and the bit depth to 10-bit. This is basically going to give you the most information when the camera is capturing video footage, and it's just going to allow for higher quality footage overall. Now, one thing I like about the GoPro Hero 12 is the fact it gives you so much control over all the different camera settings that you can change. Now, I recommend that you film everything in GoPro's GP log color profile. Now, what this is going to do, it's going to allow you to preserve details in the highlights and in the shadows. I'm going to give you way more flexibility when it comes to color grading in post-production. So for that reason, I basically shoot everything in GP log. I also always opt to shoot in 5.3K whenever possible so that we have the highest resolution we can. And I also set the sharpness to low to avoid any over sharpening in camera. Plus we can increase this in post-production if it's needed. Now, my preferred frame rate is 30 frames a second. So I shoot everything in 30 frames a second unless I want to have the ability to slow the footage down in post-production, in which case I'm going to shoot in 60 frames a second. Then I can slow the footage down by up to half, and it's going to help to even smooth out some micro jitters as well, which really helps when capturing that really nice cinematic footage. And when it comes to sort of field of view options, linear is going to give you the most accurate representation of the natural image. Now, when you start pushing to wide, super view, and even hyper view, you're going to get a lot of crazy distortion around the edges. And to be perfectly honest, I only really push it to wide if I'm trying to do really cinematic things. You are going to get a little bit of distortion, but you can correct this with sort of lens correction in post-production. But basically, I shoot everything in linear, and the fact that you have linear plus horizon lock or linear plus horizon leveling means that you don't even have to have the camera perfectly straight, and your footage is still going to look bang on. The cinematic footage can fall into sort of two different categories. You can have really smooth footage, and then you can also have kind of jarry action, more focused footage. And when it comes to having smooth footage, I recommend you just turn on hyper smooth with auto boost, get it all the way up to as much stabilization as you can get in camera. That's going to allow you to have the smoothest image straight out of the camera and require the least post-processing. But if you want that really edgy, jarry, shaky look, turn all the stabilization off, and you're going to get that really sort of raw camera look that you're looking for. When it comes to ISO, I recommend that you shoot everything in ISO 100. This is going to give you the clearest image, it's going to give you the least amount of noise, and it's just going to result in a more cinematic video. Setting our shutter speed is going to depend on the frame rate that we're filming in, and we're going to follow the 180-degree shutter rule here, so our shutter speed should be double our frame rate. So if I'm shooting in 30 frames a second, my shutter speed is going to be 1/60. If I'm shooting in 60 frames a second, it's going to be 1/120. Now, when you do this, the chances are your image is going to be overexposed, and that's where you're going to need a set of these. Now, these are ND filters. What these basically do, they reduce the amount of light coming into the camera so that we can still get the correct exposure when using our desired shutter speed. Now, if you noticed on my hand, I've got a few plasters on here. Yesterday, I had a bit of an accident with my FPV drone. I was a bit too tired really to be flying it. And yeah, I ended up cutting myself pretty bad, but we're still here, we're cracking on, and I'm showing you more about the GoPro and how to get the most cinematic footage possible. The last setting that we need to take manual control of is going to be our white balance. Now, we want to take control of this because if we leave this on automatic, we can get some really awkward sort of color shifts in our videos if we're going from different lighting environments, where if you lock it, you're not going to have any of that. Now, the best sort of settings to use is going to be somewhere between 5000 or 5500 Kelvin. This is basically because this is the sort of range of light that you actually get from the sun. So something like that is going to give you the most natural image. Sometimes if you're indoors, you might have to lower the white balance to a lower value, or if it's sunset, you might have to increase the value a bit higher just to make things look more natural. But you got to just play with that. Look at the scene, look at the camera, look at the image, and get it set to what looks the most natural. Now I'm going to talk a bit more about sort of composing a shot and what's going to look good and different types of shots you can put together to make a nice cinematic sequence. The first really basic, really easy rule you can follow is to capture the same thing from different perspectives and also from different distances. And what this basically means is capture something from far away, medium distance, and then a really close-up shot somewhere focusing more on that subject. Now, basically what that could mean, I'm out here in a rice field, so we got a really nice overview of the rice field, and then I go a bit closer, we can do a nice sort of moving shot getting up a bit more, and then we can have a really close-up shot of one of the individual rice plants. Now that's just sort of putting things in motion for a broad landscape. If you're focusing on a person, you can have a really far out shot where you can see the whole landscape and the person is quite small in the shot. And then you can have the one that's a bit closer where you can see the movement has come closer to the person, and then you can focus in maybe on their hands swinging or their feet walking along. Something like that is just going to help to elevate the level of cinematicness in your footage. Now, the next thing that's going to help you to really compose your shots in a more cinematic way is to use the sort of rule of thirds grid. And you can get this shown on your camera display. It's going to make it really easy when you're framing shots. And basically, the easiest way to describe this is when you're looking at the screen, your eyes are more drawn to the sort of places where those lines intersect. And only put things dead in the middle if they're supposed to be like an authoritative figure, or if you're doing basically a video like this where I'm giving you a tutorial. You want to make sure that I am the front and center focus. Otherwise, you're going to want to try and offset people a little bit, or offset your subject to sort of put them on one of these intersecting points, and it's going to give your footage that next level flair that's going to separate it from everyone else. Another compositional tool you can use is using natural things in the scene that act as leading lines. And what that basically means is anything that's natural that's sort of pointing in one direction towards something, the viewer's eye will actually look towards that, follow that down, and that should be the focal point of the video. You can sort of see in this shot here where I was on the deck, you can see all the decking lines are pointing towards basically where I want you to be looking, which is where I am walking. That's kind of what I mean when I talk about leading lines pointing towards your subject. I'm going to quickly just talk about lighting. So if you're out shooting in the middle of the day, you're going to get really harsh light from the sun, especially if it's at its peak, and it's not going to look really cinematic. There are some things you can do to sort of overcome this, but the most cinematic times of day to be filming are going to be around sunrise and sunset. That's because we have much softer lighting. We've got more tones coming out in the sky, the oranges, the reds, and also if it's a bit more cloudy, you're going to get natural softening by the clouds, so it's going to make your footage more cinematic as well. Basically, like right now today, I've come out to film. It's about 7 AM in the morning. The sun is still fairly low. There's some nice cloud cover, softens the image up, and it just makes everything look a bit more vibrant and less harsh, which just makes things look more cinematic. And the last but arguably the most important point about capturing cinematic footage is capture clips that are going to aid your storytelling. When somebody's watching something and it's supposed to be really nice and cinematic, you've got to have really good footage that's story driven, that takes the viewer on a journey. Now you've got to think about this. What's the message you want to deliver? What are the shots that are going to help to deliver that message in the best possible way? Capture emotion, capture all the things that are going to help to make the scene that you're experiencing translate, and the story to the viewer in the most authentic way. Now, because of this, you actually have to be really harsh when it comes to editing. You got to cut. Only use the best pieces of footage that are going to help to drive that story forward in a really nice cinematic fashion, using all of the tips that I've given you in this video, the best settings that are down below. And that's how you're going to get the most cinematic footage out of your GoPro Hero 12. So I really hope you've got some valuable information out of this video. I'm going to leave that PDF link down below. Go and download it. It's going to make it nice and easy to find those cinematic settings like that. And I hope that all of this is going to allow you to take your GoPro footage to the next level. Now, thank you so much for watching. I put a fair bit of time into making this video, and I'm actually shooting for 5,000 subscribers by the end of this year. I've got about a month to hit it. We're currently at about 4,600. So if you want to subscribe to see more content like this, feel free. If not, it doesn't matter. But thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, and I will see you in the next one. I look forward to seeing your cinematic GoPro footage, actually. Bye-bye.